kind of wanted to tee things up a little bit with the question that it kind of draws on what we heard last night from Todd Amon at ATVS. Here in this series, he presented his outlook for the rest of the year for owner operators, as well as sharing a lot of data from the first quarter on income for some of the various segments. There's some is up, some is down, but everything is fairly steady in a lot of ways. Given we've seen some of these big swings in the spot market, where folks had a big payday during that, fuel's down, which helped a lot of folks get through this, and a variety of other things, But in the short term, though, it looks so shaky and kind of strange that it's hard to predict with a lot of confidence. So he told us sort of all last night that in a time like this, we should really, quote unquote, manage for the downside. Is the words he used, given the uncertainty of where we're really going and whatever that's going to look like. But if things turned out better than expected, the upside will sort of take care of itself. And, while that sounds all well and good, how do we do that really? What questions should, individual owner operators out there be asking themselves right now, looking ahead through the next 6 months to a year in you guys' estimation? Kevin?
I just to follow up with what Todd said, and I got to say, Todd's a good friend of mine, and we've actually had some business ventures together. He is absolutely brilliant when it comes to business. He's one of the few people I've met that can look at the big picture and understand it, which is one of my strengths. I'm really good at the big picture. He's also really good at day-to-day details and making sure stuff gets done. And that's a rare combination. I need 6 people around me to make sure I make it to the webinar on time. So I really respect Todd when it comes to business, and I agree with him. The upside is going to take care of itself. You don't need to be looking for big new ventures or revenue streams or taking any risks right now. You've got to protect that downside. And the first thing, there's several things we could talk about tonight, but the first thing I would say is you look at your line items on a profit and loss statement. And if you don't have one, you better get one. And you start cutting expenses to the bone. You just start cutting everything that isn't necessary to run the business right now. When things are good and there's lots of business to go be found, you can afford to spend some money. It wasn't unusual for me, and it wasn't up until just recently, to just jump on a plane or jump in the coach and go visit somebody just to build a relationship. But that's pretty expensive. I wouldn't do that today. There's no way I would spend that kind of money knowing what we're facing. So the first thing I would say is pull out a good recent P&L and look at every expense you could cut and start cutting them.
Gary, is that square with, is there something beyond, cutting costs that folks can do when you think about managing for downside risk?
Yeah, I kind of see things that I agree with the cutting of the cost. I think we need to watch that all the time. We need to always be in tune to that. I think about where people are at, and it's not just during these times that I run into this. We talked in preparation for this about throwing up our foundation. You don't have a strong foundation to build on, to maintain. And that foundation can be our maintenance. It can be our customer base. It's not every customer maybe, but you may have a customer you haul 30% of your loads for. That's a foundation customer. I think about what do we know for sure? What do we know to be true? And that's part of our foundation. So for example, I'll get just really simple things between now and the end of the year. And I don't know if other people look at this, but I always did. I kind of look at the calendar. I kind of brought up a calendar here, and it's backwards, but I want you to see kind of how I highlighted. What I've got here is I kind of marked, if I was still working and driving, how many days would I work between now and the end of the year? I don't know if other people would do this, but when you identify how many days you actually are going to work. Now, maybe the best place to start is the days you're going to take off. You want to make sure you have your off time. So know what's true. You've got between now and the end of the year, there's basically 122. The first of the month, there'll be 122 days left. Most people are going to work maybe 75 of those days, maybe 90 at the most in a truck, potentially. And that doesn't sound like much, does it? Between now and the end of the year, because Kevin talked about the P&L. People, do they have their P&L up to date? Do they even know what their first half of the year P&L looks like? Do they know those numbers? They need to know that. But in 75 working days, this fiscal year could be over for them.
So maximize the opportunities that you have. Ultimately, is what we're
right
about. Yeah. Kevin, when you think of foundations, Gary brought that up. I mean, what else? To build a strong foundation for a business, for an owner-operator business. So what other kinds of things are we talking about?
If we go back to foundations, and then I want to also talk about protecting the downside a little more, but on the foundations, nothing that I said 20 years ago, the first time I did this, changed. I'm going to say the same things I said 20 years ago. Know your numbers, which it's still shocking to me how few owner-operators do. And I get these calls every day on my show. Somebody wants me to help them make a decision. Should I buy a new truck? Should I get a trailer? Should I, get my own authority? Should I change carriers? And my first question is, let's talk about your numbers. And immediately you'll hear them hesitate and, well, I don't have them right now. And I'll say, look, here's the thing. You either know your numbers or you don't. Well, no, I have them on the computer. No, you don't. If you have one truck and you can't tell me your numbers right off the top of your head, then you don't have them. You don't know them. And that's the norm. And that's the first thing I would say is the foundation of every business is that financial statement. I've done this thing for years in seminars. We give handouts, and I'll hand out a P&L, one that we've developed in our software, and I'll go through it with people. And I'll point out, here's this cost and that cost. And in 30 minutes, we'll be talking about it. People are amazed by what they learn from that one piece of paper. And I'll say, here's the really sad part. About 80% of you in the room now know more about a stranger's owner-operator business than you know about your own, because we took 30 minutes to go through the numbers and look at everything you learned. So that's the first one for me. You've got to have the numbers. You've got to build good relationships, whether that's, direct customers. If you're working with brokers, those are your customers. If you're leased to a carrier, that's your customer. You've got to build good relationships within those organizations. And if you've done those two things, you'll probably make it through any downturn we ever face in trucking. It really is that simple. The other thing I would say, and protecting the downside, is in good times. I talked about this earlier. You can do things differently in good times. You can be a little pickier about things. One of the things I hear in trucking all the time are the I don't statements. And that's fine. I love being an entrepreneur because you get to choose what you do. But that doesn't mean you always get to do just what you want to do. And this is one of those times where you have to stop thinking that way. I hear statements like, I never go to New York City. I don't go north of I-40 in the wintertime. I don't. Great. If your P&L looks good and you're happy with your profit, do that all you want. I would drop all of those I don't statements right now.